Hello and welcome to the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. I'm your host, Jeff Harvey, registered migration agent with Down Under Visa, the premier Australian migration agent in Manila, Philippines, specialising in visas for Australian Filipina couples. We hope you enjoy this podcast and hope it proves useful to you. Please feel free to share this with your partner and with any of your interested friends. Let's get started. Remarrying in the Philippines. Will you have problems? Now, are you an Australian divorcee and intend on remarrying in the Philippines? You met your lovely Filipina lady and you want to give her the dream wedding with all of her family there. Now, are you concerned about whether this will be a problem or not? We will explain some of the issues you will need to deal with on your way to a happy marriage and later to a partner visa to Australia from the Philippines. Now, remarrying, the issues. Look, the Philippines is one of two countries in the world, now the other is Vatican City, where they do not have legal divorce. There's no no-fault divorce like they have in Australia. The Philippines is well known as the only real Christian nation in Asia, with 86% of the population being Catholic. Now, divorce is not only not legal, it's also really not part of the culture. Marriage for life is a Filipino belief and practice, and be honest, it's one of the reasons that many of us were attracted in the Philippines in the first place. Again, be honest, that was the high rate of divorce in Australia and the possibility of marrying again and then having to go through the whole misery of divorce all over again. It's a little bit off-putting, and then you discover there's part of the world where ladies still believe in marriage and are less likely to just toss things away at the first sign of a problem. Well, it is kind of appealing. So, yes, I guess you can't have it both ways. So, but yes, here, like a couple being married for 50 years, it's not something that makes the newspapers. There's nothing particularly amazing about it. It just means they're probably in their 70s. So, arriving here as a divorcee, naturally, you would wonder and probably worry what sort of reception you will face, both from the family and from attempts to remarry in the Philippines. So that's the purpose of this article in the first place. Now, remarriage, Philippines society views. Look, I can remember back in the 90s when I nearly married the wrong girl. Yes, it took me a few attempts before I met the right one. The curse of being basically trusting. So I nearly went through remarrying in the Philippines. So what happened? Okay, her father. He wanted to see a copy of my divorce papers. No, I didn't carry them around with me, and yes, being Australian, I got my back up and I resented being asked to prove that I wasn't lying. It's just not really it's not really the Australian way of dealing with things, as asking somebody to prove that they're telling the truth. Them's fighting words to an Australian. But yes, in his generation, the thought of divorcing was particularly unheard of. He probably thought I was a Western playboy or something, and obviously wanted to ensure I wasn't intending to do the wrong thing by his daughter. But he never said no. Other relatives. Now, while I was writing this, I was searching my memory because it was going back a little while. It was brought up, and Filipinos are often not backward about coming forward about a lot of things, and people will ask you about your previous marriage and divorce. They may ask you directly if you're a playboy. I can remember somebody doing that with me, so I thought it was hilarious. If you know me, you know that's not really me at all. They will ask you what you paid for something. They'll ask if you have unmarried brothers. Shy about some things, other things, well, not quite so shy I guess that's where it clashes, where we are comfortable about expressing things, they're not, and vice versa. So I don't think anyone actually had a problem with me being a divorcee or with remarrying. And look, plus, okay, that might be the Filipino way, but they don't live under a rock. They're quite aware of what happens in the rest of the world, and they are aware that Western countries have a different view on things. And you turn up there as a white fella, they're not expecting you to, be Filipino about everything. The church. Now, I'll explain the religious implications a bit further down, but just talking about the views here now. We went to the office of the diocese. Now, a diocese is an area where there are a number of churches and priests, and a bit like a district, I suppose you'd say, and the boss of this diocese is the local bishop. So the diocese office is where the bishop hangs out and where you go to organise important things. Well, we went there and met a fairly serious-looking nun, and she didn't seem overly impressed that I was a double divorcee, so natural enough, I suppose. However, it wasn't going to be a problem in our case anyway if we had have gone ahead, which fortunately we didn't. Fortunately, I made an extremely wise decision, and it's not just because she's sitting across the room from me right now, I would say it anyway. Remarrying in Philippines, the legal implications. Okay, an Australian divorce to an Australian. Okay, legally you may remarry in the Philippines. The law of the Philippines accepts your divorce done in the Australian courts, and you may marry freely and legally. There are no issues at all. Now, there is many a divorced Australian marries in the Philippines, never an issue. So feel free to do so, and you won't have any hindrance at all. Now, an Australian divorce to a Filipina. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but again, the object of this article is about remarrying in the Philippines, not remarrying in Australia. So there lies the key. Australian divorce to a Filipina, yes. Did you marry a Filipina before? Now, I seriously hope you didn't go through the rigmarole of an annulment in the Philippines to end this marriage, because you didn't need to. I've come across Australians who have gone through all that, and I've just thought they could have saved themselves a whole lot of headache. A few people I stopped before they went ahead because they were told, by their ex-lady or the current lady that they have no choice. They have to go and do this, and no doubt the local attorney would have told them the same thing. But a foreign national, such as yourself, talking to the Australian here, you may end that marriage through a no-fault divorce in Australia. Now, you can do that despite your marriage being under Philippines law. How do I know? Well, other than reading Article 26 of the Family Code of the Philippines, which, look, if you're looking at the blog article, you can click on that link and you can see all about it. But look, I have also had a Philippines marriage before, and I ended it with an Australian divorce. There was no problem at all. So, yes, take my word for it. Been there, done that, as of so many others, and we've certainly had plenty of clients go and do the same thing. So, yes, you may do that. Don't go through an annulment. Not you, the Australian. Go get the divorce done in Australia, and it's not. Oh, look, you have a few issues about as far as serving documents and what have you, but look, talk to your lawyer. Don't talk to me about it. It's nothing is insurmountable. Certainly a lot easier than getting an annulment. So, what about a Filipino or Filipino divorcing in Australia? Now, this is a very important point. Now, we've had clients who've dodged the long and painful annulment process in the Philippines by applying for a partner visa as a de facto couple, and B, getting an Australian divorce of that previous marriage in Australia later on when they are legally entitled to do so as an established Australian resident. So take note of that, as an established Australian resident. Do not kid yourself into thinking that you can bring her to Australia on a tourist visa and she can go and get a divorce. Doesn't work that way. So, but yes, in the case of Filipina, they're still seen as married in the Philippines and will have difficulty remarrying in the Philippines. Okay, so if they divorce in Australia and then go chopping off back to the Philippines and try and remarry, well, they'll go, no, hey, hang on, you're still legally married, and that's how they will be seen in the Philippines. So in cases like that, I've always suggested that the couples don't even try. Look, it can be done, but in short, it means having to go through the court system and having to convince the court that the divorce that took place was valid. They don't expect an Australian to do that, but they do expect a Filipino to do that. So it's about as complicated as going through an annulment. So seriously suggest you don't do it. So don't even try. Just marry in Australia, look at an onshore partner visa, look at a prospective marriage visa, and it's perfectly fine, a whole lot simpler. So, yes, the Catholic Church remarrying in the Philippines. Now, this is where it gets less simple. But again, just remember what I said before you criticise the mean old Catholic Church for making things difficult. Just remember that the values instilled in your lady, where she believes in marriage for life, that came from the Catholic Church. So again, you can't have it both ways. So a bit of an introduction to Catholicism for beginners and for cradle Catholics who've forgotten more than they've learned or never understood in the first place. It's about the word sacrament. You'll hear that bandied about in Catholicism. Now, in simple terms, you could say these are the times when heaven and earth merge and you are at one with God. And there were 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church. One of these is matrimony, marriage. More than just a contract, and it's permanent and indissoluble. Try that one, indissoluble. Can't be dissolved. Can't end a sacrament with a divorce. You may legally divorce, but in the eyes of the Church, you still have that sacrament. So you marry through the sacrament of matrimony, and you do it once only. Now, annulments. Now, I've seen people get these ones confused. There are 2 types of annulments. I won't cover civil, legal annulments right now, as I have done before. There are other articles, there are other videos about that, so I won't go way off track with that. But the other type is a church annulment, which is very, very, very similar to a legal annulment. No doubt this was the model when they were designing the civil annulments that exist in the Philippines legal system. Now, to annul a marriage, it means you're not cancelling a contract that took place. You're not cancelling a sacrament that took place. It means you need to make it clear that no contract, or in this case no sacrament, was made in the first place. So how is this done? Now, I have no experience of church annulments. I've never talked through the process with anybody, so I'm not an expert in this area. Talk to your priest if it becomes an issue. But yeah, again, it's about establishing that no sacrament took place at the time. Now, things like being forced to marry. Now, that could be one of the reasons to say a sacrament never took place. It's hardly a meeting of heaven and earth when somebody's being dragged kicking and screaming into a marriage that they don't want. So, yeah, if you can show that one person was forced to do so by family, etc. Bigamy could be another one where the spouse was already married to somebody else. In other words, they already have a contract, they already have a sacrament with somebody, and then they go off and try to do it again. Well, no sacrament was made for that reason. Lying about something essential, such as impotence, basically being incapable of making a sacrament and not attending to honour the marriage from the start. So it's a case of establishing that. But just a careful note. I mean, we had somebody recently send through a copy of a church annulment as proof that the marriage was over. Yeah, as far as remarrying the church, yes. As far as getting a visa, no, not at all. So, church annulment will only allow you to remarry in a Catholic church. A civil annulment has no significance within the church, and a church annulment doesn't legally end a marriage either. So, don't expect this will get you a partner visa. This is just purely if you are planning on remarrying in a Catholic church, giving you a bit of an idea what you have to go through. Now, divorcing from a non-Catholic marriage. Now, what if you were married with a celebrant or in a registry office, or you had a Hindu or Islamic marriage, or you were married to a born-again Christian in a born-again Christian church? Now, if you married in the registry office, then no sacrament was made. The same applies to celibates or any non-Christian marriages. Other churches, look, it will depend on the church itself, and I really bow out of that one again. You will need to speak to the church about that before remarrying in the Philippines, and to speak to the parish priest about it. Now, marrying a non-Catholic. Okay, to marry in the Catholic Church, at least one of you must be Catholic. The non-Catholic intending spouse may marry if he is okay with children of the marriage being raised as Catholics. That's the basic rule. But yes, they will allow a non-Catholic to marry, but not, if two non-Catholics go past a church and go, wow, look at this is magnificent, this would make for a beautiful wedding, we want to get married in there. If they're both not Catholic, well then, sorry, it can't be done. Don't even try. Conclusion. Look, you will find that most girls in the Philippines these days have no problem in marrying a divorced man. No doubt you'll have to explain this all in your courting days, so it's unlikely you'll be putting on your wedding outfit and one day and have her say, oh gosh, I can't marry you. I mean, they're the types of things that you talk about in your courting days now, obviously, don't you? I'm divorced. Are you okay with that? Well, she's got plenty of time to say she's not, or to say my parents can't, won't allow that. So, but again, these days, I don't believe I've ever actually heard of it happening at all. I don't believe I've ever had a client say to me, look, I'm sorry, we can't go ahead with this because her parents won't allow it, or she's just horrified. So, so in other words, don't panic too much about that one. Look, and yeah, again, if she has an issue, you will know about it early enough. Now, if she belongs to, for example, the Seventh-day Adventists or the Iglesia Ni Cristo, then she will probably be expecting you to convert to that religion beforehand. And no doubt you and she will have had this discussion anyway, so that's the area where you really need to find out. I mean, if you don't want to convert and join a particular church, if you can't bring yourself to do that, well then, yeah, clear it up in the early days. Regarding the church, if this is something that matters to you and to her, then do some investigating before you proceed. The church has its rules and it won't bend. Don't get annoyed if this is the case. You're perfectly entitled to a civil wedding as long as you are legally free to marry. Hope that helped. Thanks very much. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed and we hope you found this useful. Australian visas from the Philippines are not easy and the outcome matters, as you well know. Please feel free to contact us anytime if you need some further help. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye-bye.